Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cancel Me Now podcast. My name is Isaac Butterfield, joined always with the great Bluey Nielsen.
Hello.
Hey, bro. And Tony Jones. It's Tony Butterfield. How you doing, big fella?
Hi, Zachy.
Hello.
Hey, mate.
Now, I will remind you once to speak into your microphone, please.
Okay.
We're having issues. This is my lovely father, ladies and gentlemen, and he's the only person to ever walk into this studio and not give a shit that it looks great and it's beautiful. He just complained about the microphone. So
I complain about the seat, mate.
yeah. It's a 200-year-old French chair, mate.
Yeah, well, the Frenchmen were 5 foot in those days.
Yeah, it's a nice heavy chair. It survived 200 years, and I just want you just to enjoy it and think about the history and the amount of people that may, who knows who has sat in that. Maybe
But if I enjoy it, I won't be able to be heard.
You can pull it close. You can pull the mic close to you. You can pull the chair in. You got, oh, geez, watch the table. This is handmade. Fuck.
It's gone through 200 years. It's not going to last 5
Right,
minutes.
let's go.
It's
Well, you know Jones. You've met him before.
I've had the pleasure multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Through rugby league, local footy.
You were a bit concerned about talking too much footy on the show today.
Well, I'm not sure what your audience is interested in. It's footy has an interest for me, but in the history, but can get quite boring
If you're not indulging in that.
No. Although there are many parallels, of course, across all sorts of sports that we could probably have a chat about. But preparation, mindset, goal setting,
A lot of it carries over.
biology, physiology, these sorts of things.
We do often run into an issue whenever we talk footy is we dive straight in and then we dive deep on it, don't we, Blue? We just go into it too much and we do lose people.
Your old man brought a notepad. He said, just in case you blokes go off on any tangents.
Right, to reel us back in.
I said, there's every chance. It happens every week.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good tangents, but to give you a bit of an idea,
How long you blokes known each other for?
now coming up on 30 years.
Yeah.
But no, Jones is very well versed in most.
How long you blokes known each other for?
Well, you playing the podcast through your phone.
No, it came through the headphones.
It came through the headphones. Thanks, Gabe. Good to see you, Gabe, killing it once again. Jones, you're very well versed in a lot of things. We were talking about the other day on the podcast about in the NRL, in the Australian Rugby League, and obviously the New Zealanders are involved in that as well, about minimum wage and something that you brought in through the RLPA. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, well, number one, I'm not versed in many things.
You are versed in a lot of things.
Yeah.
I've known you for, as Bluey said,
You
quite a while.
overestimate me.
You can talk about anything and talk in depth about a lot of things.
Whether it be factual, a bit like yourself.
Yes.
That's not. We're not at all give a fuck about facts here, mate.
No,
That's not just talk.
Facts are not the issue here.
Yeah. Now, well, in relation to the for those uninitiated out there, the Players Association, which is effectively the union, which was something that I set up when I retired from professional sport 23 years ago. Different iterations, and the most recent one is doing a deal for a play out compared to when I was doing it, which was closer to 100 million, is now closer to 1.37 billion. So there's a lot of money there. The media is, of course, making claims that the players are greedy and trying to maintain a focus on that. The RLPA, as I once did, trying to maintain the focus not so much on a grab for cash, but on the social sort of settings that Clint Newton, who's in charge at the moment, could impose. That is looking after injured players, doing further research into concussion, education and welfare, making sure kids who are basically drafted into rugby league or indoctrinated into rugby league as 14, 15-year-olds, and everyone blows smoke up their ass from that time on, and they don't really have a mind to learn about anything else, becomes quite one-dimensional, which leaves them quite dysfunctional afterwards. So those sorts of education pieces are very important. So that whole swathe of sort of social improvements within the professional game are incredibly important to the individuals.
I think they've done a fairly good job, like Clint Newton and the RLPA, of making that known, because like you said, like the media's done such a beat up of just saying it's like a cash grab for the players. They just want more money. Realistically, that's not it at all. And I think Clint Newton and the guys did a really sort of well targeted and well coordinated like social media thing. They all posted those like turquoise tiles, all the players like at once, and sort of everyone had that information out there, which was a really good way to sort of combat what the big media companies were doing, because without that, you probably would have just thought it was a cash grab for the players, when obviously it's about a lot more than that.
And a lot of these guys are quite terrified of copying it in the media because they see it on the front page, and this is sort of the realm they're in. And a lot of these young guys, they, you know, if you're reading in the paper that you're doing this wrong or you're doing that wrong or you're being greedy, then you start to believe it. But if you can have a united front come out and actually say, no, this is what we want, bugger you guys. And I know you sort of dealt with that in, was it 2003 or 2004 with the Dally M's. A united front came out and actually decided that we are so serious about what we're fighting for here, and this goes across any sport or even any industry.
Any union.
We're so united on this front that we're willing to forego all the things that we're used to, be it the Dally M's, be it round one or whatever it was that these players were talking about, hey, we'll just not even turn up. That they are willing to go and do that, and to have a united front, to have people there backing you up. You know, this is something that's actually quite new. Usually it's just every man for himself.
Well, it's not really new. There were periods in the 30s and 40s. You go to the US, there was literally compulsory unionism after the stock market crash, and Roosevelt tried to rebuild everything, and they built roads and bridges and levee banks, and there was a huge infrastructure build across the US, and everybody was encouraged to be in trade unions. Now that lifted the country and the rest of the world out of sort of the doldrums, but from that point where there was probably 90% unionism amongst the working class, you know, here in Australia, unless you're talking about the United Mine Workers, who are a high density group, or the construction union.
Maritime
really strong. Other than that, mate, most people out there are battling on their fucking own. Like this is, and the whole concept of unionism has been tarnished in such a way that, and also not educated about. Like, you know, unions are one half of the labour capital equation, and it's been going on for centuries, and yet you don't hear anything about this in school. No. You don't hear anything about diet. You don't hear anything about
money.
You know, all of the important things, goal setting. You know, and so people know nothing about unions. They eschew unions as sort of some radical left group, and they cause all these problems. Now, all these problems are often sort of manifested through the media, and that's how we educate ourselves these days, sadly. No one wants to pick up a book and look deeply into the history. They just want to have a quick look and, right, that's my appreciation of the world. But as we found, certainly through COVID, if you look at COVID, those who were in trade unions did far, far better. And the players are a classic example of that. They stuck together. You know, the league was crying poor and all the rest of it, although the money was still rolling in, and the players were looked after. That was only because they were set up as a union. You know, but there are millions of Australians out there working. There are millions of people around the world who have no unions and are scared off by the stigma attached to unions, and that stigma is maintained through the media, and that media is supported by the big corporations. That's their business model. That's how they sell advertising. If you start, you know, encouraging people to join unions, well, you won't see McDonald's or the big banks or the big oil companies or technology wanting to sponsor with you anymore. So it's you know, it's been crushed to the point. You know, don't get me wrong, there have been some scallywags in unions who have really set the movement back a long way. But you know, equally so, there are scallywags in big business who have you know, only got to go back to the banking Royal Commission of 2 or 3 years ago. You know, they discovered millions and millions of breaches of Australian law, fraud, charging dead people, you know, for years after they died for life insurance. Not one person went to jail. So for fraud and these sorts of things, you know, tens of billions of dollars, and in fact the banks were fined billions of dollars didn't hurt them.
It's a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
It's a drop in the ocean. Yet a little kid, gets caught with a bit of drugs in his pocket or whatever. He's looking at a jail term. Mm-hmm. But in the financial crimes, it's not the case. Now, people might say, well, that's because it's just financial. It's not hurting anybody. Well, it does hurt everybody. Families. If you happen to be in that situation and you've got 3 or 4 kids and a mortgage you can't jump over, and you've got debts rolling in and creating enormous amounts of stress in the home, and somebody pulls a swifty at the corporate level, and you lose your job. All of a sudden, your kids are now exposed. The mental anguish that goes on through the family. These are generational issues. We've seen that in the issues with the Indigenous community. They've just been intergenerationally excluded from a lot of what's going on. They don't get the support that they need. There's always talk every election that they're going to do this and that, and literally just dog whistling, to trying to get some of the nice people out there thinking, oh, they're a lovely government, we'll vote them in. But I can't see the governments changing, Labor, Liberal. They're all the same. Basically, as one follows the other, one is already doing deals, free trade deals around the world with the US or whatever. So Albanese moves in Australia here, tosses out that goose Morrison, who was corruptly organising all sorts of rorts going on. And Albanese maybe had high ideals. He walks into the lodge and or into Parliament House and says, right, I'm going to do X, Y and Z. And the bureaucrats come along and say, oh, no, we've got all these deals in play now. And if you were to breach those deals, as you're suggesting, well, we'll find ourselves in The Hague and in some sort of mad corporate court and get fined, billions and billions of dollars. It's exactly what happened with the plain packaging with the cigarettes. This is all through the free trade deals, the so-called free trade deals, which are effectively the deals are investor rights arrangements. And so there was a deal done at some point that Australia wouldn't put plain packaging because that would impact the marketing and the income of British American tobacco and the like. And out of the blue, they're called to court after going to the plain packaging space. And it hasn't been revealed, but rumours are that many billions of dollars that the Australian government or the taxpayer has now been paid. So it just makes my point that each time a government moves in, well-intentioned, there are all these other plans that are in play. They're all commercial deals, and you can't just stop those deals.
Well, it makes you wonder how much power someone coming into that role has. Even in America with Trump, he had all these grand ideas, and then all of a sudden he was just another politician. And even Barack Obama, when he came into play, you're talking about protecting whistleblowers. It was on his website. It was everywhere. This was one of his big players. It's like, we want whistleblowers to come out and talk to us about crimes that are being committed. And then it was erased. Like he walked back on it to the point where he erased it from his website, or any trace of it gone, because he realised that you can't do it. You can't play by your rules or what you've promised to walk in with.
Yeah, he's got in the US. It's much more out in the open. Here in Australia, apparently we've got contribution laws. You can't give a government or an election campaign too much money. And the US is just open slather. They've got to run a campaign. It's a couple of billion.
Yeah.
If you want to stay in power, and those politicians that get up to that level are comfortably bought and paid for well before they get to that point. They have to come up through their local primaries and through their state electorates and the like. And by that point, they've got big business in their pocket, driving, paying for their staff, paying for their campaigns, paying for, trips to various.
What's old love's name?
Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi.
She's the Speaker of the House.
What's she worth, Gabe?
She's worth more than Warren Buffett and insider trading.
I don't know if she'd be worth more than Warren Buffett.
I think she's.
What was her last
She's
name?
better at
Nancy Pelosi.
She's the Speaker of the House in the States, and her husband, because she gets all the tips, they get tipped off. And her husband pumps all the money in and buys the stocks, and just before they sign off on, it's crazy.
her husband in between being.
Yeah, getting sucked off by homeless dudes and fuck.
Did you see that video of her husband? So the police, and Gabe, you can probably pull this up too, Nancy Pelosi's husband.
Okay.
So he was assaulted in his home by a dude he was handcuffed to
With a hammer.
And then the police video, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is weird," and also the right wing media's coming out going, "This is dodgy as," and the left wing media's going, "No, someone stormed his home," but they came out with the police video, and the police video, if Gabe was doing his job, would be ready to go.
Nah, he's got too much to do.
Too much to do.
We've got
the
Pelosi.
police video is the police walk up and say, "Mate, what's going on?" And they go, "Mate," to the other guy, "Can you drop the hammer?" And he's like, "Nah." He just goes, "Nah, not doing it," and then just beats old mate over their head.
And he's in his undies too.
And he's in his undies.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pelosi, a lot of money. She's got
Yeah.
a lot of money for a lady that only. Oh, watch out! Video contains graphic images. Video shows struggle for hammer. So there's old mate. Jesus, Gabe, for fuck.
I don't know why it does that.
So here's
Nah, this isn't the one I saw.
Is this it?
That was the first thing I could find.
Keep going through it. Scroll through it.
It's like body cam footage.
It's body cam footage of the police. So keep going along. Keep going. Go. Yeah, this.
Yeah.
So he's like, the coppers are going, "Can you put that down? Can you put that hammer down? This is Pelosi's husband." And he goes, "Nah, not putting it down." And he just,
That's not funny.
full on. But yeah, I don't know what Pelosi's worth. Have a look at that, Gabe, because that's
I think the point you're making is that they're all somewhat corrupt.
This is what we're talking about, tangents,
so
mate.
her net worth
This
is
is what we're saying.
$135 million. And what would she get paid? a
Her
year?
salary is probably like 300 grand or something.
Well, I'll Google it, Gabe, because you'll be all fucking day. Pelosi
I think you're doing a
salary.
good job, mate.
She's getting paid. She earns $223,000 a year from as Speaker of the House, and she's worth $123 million.
From good investments.
Yeah.
Really, really good investments.
Really good investments.
But yeah, they're all shonks.
And we saw Morrison. Morrison, he didn't care. He just went headlong into the needs of big corporations, and he didn't care because he knows that post his demise, he'll get looked after. You think of
Well, they just get jobs as, like you say, consultancy jobs or speaking jobs for big private firms.
The Premier walked into Telstra, wasn't it, or Optus?
Yeah, Mike Baird. Was it Mike Baird after him?
Mike Baird walked into. He was into something, and then old love. What's the name? The fucking Berejiklian walked straight into Optus or Telstra.
They just go into private
Straight in.
CEO jobs, consultancy
No
jobs.
worries.
there was a big oil company, one of the biggest oil companies in the world, and it was trying to get the gas and oil reserves out of East Timor, which is why Australia went into East Timor. There was all this sort of front about protecting these people who looked after us in World War II and stopped the Japanese southward advance to the mainland of Australia. But eventually they established their independence, and then there was a negotiation. And the negotiation was with, the big oil companies and whatnot, and there were literally trillions of dollars of reserves just off their coast. And so one of the poorest nations on the world had, finally lucked out. This is great. Okay, everybody's knocking on our door. Alexander Downer, former foreign minister in John Howard's government, he then decides to use ASIO or it might be CIA or whatever. They bugged the negotiations, so the private negotiations of the East Timorese crew, there's all bugs in there. So they then know what the position is. Now, the end result, and I don't quote me on the figures, but it was essentially sort of 60-40 that the big oil companies in Australia got 60% of the action and the Timorese got sort of 35%. It was a shit deal. But everything was recorded and spied on, and they knew exactly what their strategy was, and they achieved that outcome. A whistleblower, back to the whistleblowers, comes out and says, no, this was filmed at the instruction of this former minister in the Australian Parliament. And they then do their own research, take it to the World Court. The World Court finds in favour of East Timor and says the Australians were in the wrong and whatever Yank interests and whatnot. And obviously what Australia was doing was to support their Yank alliance. And they required them to go back and redo the entire deal. And the East Timorese have now ended up with a deal of something like 75-80% of the action. And these foreign sort of invaders have just picked up a few crumbs. So, but for the whistleblower, these poor East Timorese would remain that way, and big US interests, Australian interests would still be in charge, and it was all done by this wanker Downer. And he then goes off 18 months later. Now he's now working for the oil company.
Yeah.
So
It's
How do you? I just don't. And this is the importance, obviously, of whistleblowers, be it Assange, be it Snowden, be it whoever blew the whistle on that. If you don't hear about it, then no one gets in strife over it. Even though in this case, no one got in strife over it.
Well, it just happened.
But at least it's in the public. It's in their sort of. It's in the knowledge, right? People know about it at the very least. And without these people willing to sacrifice their own anonymity and their own lives in many cases, we just never hear about these things. And then the governments and the big corporations and the ones with all the power and the cash, they run their own race like they have done for centuries, and we are none the wiser. We're just the public who just sort of sits here and just cops it.
What at the risk of getting the blue label, COVID misinformation.
Oh, we've already got the blue label.
We got that for this episode.
On Spotify, if you say the word COVID or anything about vaccines, you get a little label down the bottom that says for proper COVID information, please visit the CDC. So go and check it.
don't get me started on it.
No,
Well,
no, that's what I'm worried about.
I'm kind of gonna. But like talking about that wanker Morrison and no ramifications. Whatever happened, you know how it came out, again, probably from a whistleblower, that he signed over all the portfolios secretly through COVID? He signed himself over to like...
to run all the shows.
Yeah. Then what, like, was there any outcome from that? Like, did anything happen from that?
No, there was basically, there was some on his side. This is a sitting prime minister in an emergency, and he thought with all of his great skills, in marketing...
Scotty from marketing.
that he as the Prime Minister should take on all the portfolios across health and finance and
everything,
investment, you name it. Now that may have been fine if he had sat down with his gang and said, "This is what I'm doing," but nobody knew.
Yeah.
In fact, his ministers, who these are fairly serious appointments and very formalised, none of his ministers even knew. And therefore the people of Australia didn't know, and they basically wiped it. They've gotten rid of a toxic prime minister, which I found quite amazing. At the time, the three or four main countries in the world that sort of eke out of the sort of the Anglo-Saxon sort of history, with the UK, US. Canada and Australia, all the leaders at one particular time were all fucking gooses. You had Trump. He spooked a bit of sense at times, but he was...
And he grabbed him on the pussy.
We had Morrison. They had Boris over there.
And fucking blackface.
And Trudeau. Brownface, mate.
Brownface.
And Trudeau. Now, what are the odds of having...
four of the greats.
Four buffoons all at the same time who are basically, you look at them and their intellect isn't sufficient to have them in the position, clearly, of responsibility, but they all made it. And they were all able, and they were all good marketers, all good orators, and, I just found it quite amazing.
Great timing.
And to
the
lead
timing
us
worked.
into a pandemic. And then everyone...
This is blackface Trudeau.
I
haven't actually seen these.
This is brownface. So he actually dressed up as a Saudi Arabian, I guess a prince or a dude. And it emerged, and you know what? He apologised and he meant it. So it's all good. It's all forgotten.
Play on.
He is the leader of the politically correct governments.
Like, have a look at him. Okay, he might be clever. But if you've heard him talk, even when he's serious, like you can tell it's all orchestrated.
Yeah, he's just reading a script.
He's a fucking kid. He's a puppet.
Yeah.
And exactly what Trump was, that buffoon Boris, and of course Morrison. So how do we, and here we are trying to defend in most rhetoric in the papers and whatnot, this great democratic sort of society that we live in. But where is the democracy? Other than going to the polls every 3 or 4 years, no one's listening to us. Unless you can wedge and get enough people together. That's why going back to trade unions. At the local level, if you've got 400 workers and 380 of them are all on the one team, well, the boss has got a problem. Now, one of the boss wants to kill off anybody who gets cheeky about unions, and that's why guys get sacked, for various other reasons other than the fact that they were organising a pushback for a better deal, and in circumstances where, in the US certainly, real wages have gone backwards over the last 40 years. People are working 2s and 3s and 4 jobs. Wages just haven't gone up with inflation.
Seems to be where we're going here, because
that's exactly where
how do you pay if you've got a mortgage and everyone? And I'm glad I didn't bite off more than I could chew with my mortgage. So that was Claire said to me. She was like, "Nah, don't go any higher than this amount." And I was like, because I wanted to go higher, because where we were looking at buying was just like it's just what it costs. Like around where you live, like it's just, you're looking at $1 million, like minimum for a 50-year-old house that needs 200-300K work just to make it look, brand new.
350 square metres.
Yeah, on nothing. And you have to park on the road like a lunatic. And we're lucky we ended up going where we were. But people are looking at, easy paying $4,000 a month.
Oh, with the rates going up.
With their rates coming up, they're coming off fixed interest loans, and they were sitting at a real, decent percentage, and now they're going through the roof overnight without a pay increase. They're sitting there going, well, shit, what do we do? Do we get a second job? Do we just pay, just interest? We forget about the principal for now until rates drop back down, and we just have to pay interest, but we never move forward anywhere. So, you've got this whole generation of young people who have gone balls deep into buying a house, and they're not going to have that as an asset to ever sell and look after themselves later on in retirement.
Not to mention house prices are going down because the rates are going up.
Rates are going up, house prices are going down, no movement on people's wages, the cost of groceries is outrageous. And
well, in the last 40 years, productivity has skyrocketed. Right? Productivity has gone through the roof. That is, they're more efficient, we produce more, we're making greater profits. Those profits and the result of that productivity has all been drawn upwards. This is the business model in a capitalist model, and so you've noticed all the incredibly wealthy people just getting wealthier. And was it
doing good, thanks, mate.
Midnight Oil, Peter Garrett in his song, "The rich get richer and the poor get the picture." And that's literally what's going on at the moment. If you think of the interest rates, and interest rates is a very important metric, sort of to drive investment and whatnot, and also plan for the future. Our Reserve Bank, which is a sort of a private, the only connection it has is to the British Crown and those old arrangements. But the Reserve Bank came out and said, no, we won't be lifting interest rates. They kept it deliberately low for a long time because people were saving and people weren't investing, and interest rates really low. That sucks everybody in. Everybody's now in. Oh, the interest rates are low. Once they've got everybody on board, well, now jack them up. Now they're jacking them up. Why? Like that's the question. The Reserve Bank of Australia and central banks all around the world, they've got blunt instruments to use on this, and so to slow down the overheating property market, which is not getting overheated by you or I buying, a small little block out in the burbs. It's getting overheated by the huge hedge funds that are just buying thousands of properties. Yeah, and we're seeing this in the US. BlackRock are just
BlackRock, I think
you can buy a lot of things with Blackcock.
They're
I don't see colour though, so don't worry.
In the US, it's a major thing now, and you're seeing it with a lot of guys. People who've made money, they're just buying property because they know that the property supply is just not going up. Like in economics, it's all about creating a shortage.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand. There's no point having a shitload of houses. That'll bring the prices down. So if everybody wants to make money on property, then you've got to reduce that. Now, we've also got this strong immigration policy, which on the face of it sounds great. We've brought some great people to our shores over the years, and after World War I and World War II, particularly with the Italians and the Eastern Europeans and whatnot, and they've really sort of added to the country after the Vietnam invasion. A lot of Vietnamese came out here and have done amazing things.
Just keep that mic up to you.
We just now need, in order to keep that pressure on the supply of property, of accommodation, you need to bring in all of these overseas people. So we've gone back to our immigration space and said, well, let's bring in another 200,000 or 300,000. Now those 200,000 or 300,000, they need somewhere to live. So those who own rental properties and whatnot, all of a sudden they're charging $100 more a week or $150 more a week because you've got they're driving up that lack of supply in a sense through a policy setting. So the government can do better things. I don't think that they have a particular sort of interest in it, and I don't see the media calling them out. So legacy media used to be really strong. In fact, the Sydney Morning Herald, which was owned by Fairfax, and their moniker on the top of their paper, and still is independent always. Now they were sort of those guys where you had Murdoch over here who owned 60% of all the media, and he would put out all the right wing shit. But the Sydney Morning Herald would be balanced, and they would do long exposés and magazines, and people would find out what was going on. But they've since been taken over by Nine Entertainment, and they're certainly not independent. They've got a few hawks running the show, and basically there is no independent news out there other than what you might hear on the Isaac show or hear.
Yes.
Very independent.
There's
There's only one or two brains getting around with that.
Or might I say Friendly Geordies,
Yeah.
who put out a couple after the firebombing there last year, and he's balls out, old Geordie. And he's releasing a whistleblowing on a number of major issues, particularly around the military and how they operated in Afghanistan, after trying to kick the shit out of this bloke McBride, who was an intelligence officer, and he's getting dragged through the courts for years because he whistle-blew on a couple of major war crimes. And basically he's getting his head kicked in so that anybody else cheeky enough to think that they might whistleblow at some point in the future will know that there's a whole can of whoop-ass being opened up. So the reason they really attacked this guy in this case, this McBride, was simply, okay, they wanted to damage him and damage the story and kill that story now, but they also want to send a message to any other cheeky bastard who wants to whistleblow. And I remember when the whistleblowing sort of legislation came in and everybody said, oh, this is great, like people can now be honest, and, if the Australian government's doing something in our name and they're committing crimes, that war crimes and things like that, which of course they did, we'll have it out exposed in the open. That's not happening, certainly in the mainstream press, but it takes this generation, your generation, who are a little bit cheekier and probably not fully aware of the downside of whistleblowing on these sorts of issues. And Friendly Geordies, I think, is doing a particularly strong job. There are a number of good journalists who are on the web who are doing great exposés, but you're just not getting anything from the legacy media. I don't know why anybody watches news at all except for the weather.
I don't know why people do it.
No one really.
I watch A Current Affair because it's
on before.
Funny. It is the funniest show. Like, you just watch all these people
That's not news,
screaming
though.
at each other. No, it's not news. But if you watch the news, and this was so vivid for me during COVID, when I would be watching Twitter and looking at this and reading actual reports from from the day, and then I'd watch the news, and they completely changed it. It was the same when Trump was in power or through the election. Trump would say something, and then they'd spin it in their own way. And I was like, this is just... That's what I've said a couple of times in videos and stuff. Like, one of the great things about the pandemic and these years was that people trust legacy media less.
Way less.
And government less, which I think is fantastic. But on with Geordie's, like Jordan has had a horrific 2 years.
Oh, boy.
Worked his ass off, and he's got a great team around him. But without the funding of people, without the public funding, like go through GoFundMe and all that type of stuff for his legal campaign and for his law firm to look after him, mate, he would have been like one of these whistleblowers that was just dragged through the courts. He would have had...
And silenced.
And silenced. Like, you know, Barilaro tried to take him for everything he's worth, and Jordan somehow come out of it unscathed, relatively. And now all this stuff with the firebombing, and who knows where that's come from. I don't want to, you know, speculate on that because I like my house. Yeah. I just don't want to get involved with that. I'd rather make vegan videos, but that's where we differ. Him, you know, Michael West, these type of people, they're the only ones.
Avi Emini.
Even Avi, yeah. And that's what it does my head in about Avi is people, they see him as right wing, so they don't listen to him at all.
Yeah.
But he has some great videos.
He's really good.
He's great.
And he's like...
But so's Jordan. And they're complete, and they don't even like each other.
Yeah.
They're completely, you know, opposite ends of the spectrum.
They're brave is what I like. They're like, they're not scared.
Well, he put this video out, Avi, during the week about what's happening in Alice Springs and about a lot of young Indigenous youth getting out in the middle of the night and doing whatever they want, you know, bloody bashing people, whatever they're doing. And it just, for me, it looks like these young kids just don't have anything to do. They've been brought up in whatever way they've been brought up, and maybe their parents were exactly the same, and they've got nothing to do. They've got nothing to inspire them or no reason to think that they could ever become something. They're just stuck in this mindset for whatever reason. And I mean, there's a million reasons, obviously, through, you know, institutionalized racism throughout Australian history, right? That's a very fair reason. But also, there's nothing there in Alice Springs or maybe even further out than Alice Springs. You're talking about real rural outback areas. There's nothing. There might be a hospital in fucking 500 kilometres. There's nothing there for these people.
There is a huge military installation just outside of Alice Springs.
Okay.
Pine Gap.
Yes.
And it's been there in the 60s. It was enough to topple Gough Whitlam when he wanted to throw the Yanks out, the CIA out, because they were doing sneaky things and spying on his cabinet ministers and the like. But when Gough started getting cheeky about that, he got literally thrown out of government in a day. This is a sitting Prime Minister. So there's a lot of power out there. But the point you're making is that these kids live up, you know, in the middle of Australia. It's bloody hot. It's all sand. It's all the rest of it. But this is where their traditional communities live.
Home.
But they get brought in, and you know, I don't pretend to know the whole sort of Indigenous story, but I do know basically they were seen as savages and nothing better than vermin early on to be exterminated. That's been going on for sort of 200 years in the 20s and 30s to try and sort of whiten all these little black boys and girls up. They just stole them from their families, and just pitched them into another family. I know we used to go to church, me and our family, and there'd always be these other two families, and they had a flock of kids, as everybody did in those days. And both of those families had this, right at the end of the pew was these two little black girls who looked completely sort of out of place with his family, and they were all sort of, you know, redheads, Anglos, white freckles and all the rest of it, and he's this little sad-looking Indigenous kid. And I could never sort of understand what was going on, and Mum and Dad didn't really sort of elucidate the issue, and I don't think anybody sort of really knew. But many years later, I came to understand that these kiddies had been dragged from their parents. Like, imagine getting forcibly dragged from your parents.
And to go and live with a family of redheads too, that'd be...
What a punish. What an absolute punish.
That'd be dog shit.
There's better neighbourhoods to get sent to. Well, this was something that friend of the show, Derek Val, was talking about was, it wasn't a stolen generation. They were kidnapped.
Yeah, no, that's
They
exactly
were
what.
kidnapped out of their homes
Yeah.
through this White Australia policy.
And you've got these politicians. Again, we're back to policy settings. The politicians can make things better. In this case, they had a policy setting. They were all scared of anybody who was darker than them, and they had the White Australia policy and the stolen generation, and that was their considered approach to improving the lives of Australia. Like it's particularly in Indigenous communities, they're very sort of matriarchal, and to have that impact on mothers who are at the centre of the tribal sort of community settings, it just breaks their hearts. And the kiddies like we would all have with our parents, to get dragged away and know that you were different. It wouldn't be hard. I'm black and you're white, and and you've got memories of wandering around the bush and having all these fun and eating witchetty grubs and getting in touch with nature. And now you're in the burbs, and you're told to do this and pray to some God in the sky and all of these sorts of things, and then start to learn about the official version of Australian history. It must have been irksome to that's an understatement for them to start to understand about Indigenous culture, to the extent they haven't taught Indigenous culture in our school. But I'm sure they touched on it at one point and wouldn't have mentioned the reality of it all. And so there was a few jokes you made a little while back, and
Yeah.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
we're doing. Well, no, I wasn't particularly happy,
Right.
but that's my prerogative. I'm just a fan.
You're not the only one.
You're allowed to not be happy.
Yeah.
That's the whole. Anyway, go on.
But it's about knowing the story, and I think a lot of this comes from ignorance. So you go to school, you're not taught. You're taught official history, and history is just one part of what you learn. The rest of the other stuff is just useless stuff that frustrates you, and I challenge many kids who've left high school to find anything that was important that they studied at school.
Bit of home economics, maybe, or
Well, maybe how to make a milkshake or a smoothie or something. But other than that, what's important to learn. I loved history, and I know that history tells us about our past, and you can learn from the past, and then based on the experience of our forebears, you can then settle on a strategy for the future. George Orwell had a quote about I think it was something along the lines of control the past and you control the present and you control the past. If you control the past, then you control the future. And that came from his novel 1984, the whole dystopian sort of world. But that's effectively where we are now. They control the present. If you control the present, then you can control what is written in the official history. So what we then learned at school.
History is written by the victors. Yeah.
It's written by the victors, but it's also shaped and so it's politically correct. And it's not until many years later that you start chasing down other sources. Sources that are more relevant, were closer to the time, and you start to realise that official history was bullshit. But by controlling what we thought of the past, then that impacts what we think of the future. So we go back to the past reference. We go, oh no, that was all right. Let's deal with it that same way, rather than going back to the real past and saying, geez, that was fucking bad. We need to review how we're going to look after the future. So the control of information, the control of minds, the censorship you're talking about with respect to can't talk about this, can't talk about that. They're basically just funneling everybody into a narrative. And people talk about we go to war and all these sort of platitudes for some of our soldiers. They fought for our freedoms and all of these sorts of things. What a lot of bullshit. My grandfather, he was killed in New Guinea, and or when he came home, great-grandfather was in the First War. You know, I have the utmost respect for their sacrifice and for some of the good things they did. But you think about the First World War, that was just a rip snorting, you know, let's go on a big trip kind of thing.
Yeah. I think they genuinely believe they were fighting for their country.
No, they were fighting. This is Australia. And if you think 120 years ago, Australia was a hell of a long way from Gallipoli.
Yeah, for sure.
They were doing it because kings and queens, historically over centuries, grab all their subjects, and if they've got all these subjects living on their land and growing and having families and growing chooks and things like this, they go, right, we've got a war, line up, and we'll allow you to stay on the land, but we need you to fight. And if you think, if you go to the First World War, it was just an absolute disaster. Literally by the end of 1914, something like 2 million soldiers had already been killed. That was the first year of the war. They thought it was going to be over by Christmas. Then they just got into the trenches and then it was on. But here were Australians travelling over to the Middle East in a campaign that they had little control over, that is the senior officers. That eventually changed through all the carnage. But and they achieved exactly what? You know, that we lost most of our beautiful young men of that era, as did most countries, and they just, you know, withdrew from Gallipoli and ended up going to the Western Front and sitting in the trenches and dying in millions. For who? You know, it ended up a political outcome because Germany at that time, Berlin was becoming the big cosmopolitan centre of, you know, at the turn of the 20th century. That was the big place. It was full of all the great philosophers. Economically, they were really sort of advancing. And the British obviously had issues with this because they had been at war with France and Germany and various other countries over the centuries, and they needed to pull Germany into gear, which the same thing happened in the Second War after they forced all those reparations on them. So you've got the big end of town coordinating literally over centuries, and this hasn't just been going on for 20 years. As most young people think, we sit here and we have a collective memory of 20, 30 years, a couple of decades. Yeah, that's a long time ago, and all this. But all of this stuff has been going on for centuries in one form or another. You know, and I just think that every Australian kid needs to put down the iPhone or whatever and find books, find alternative views. Okay, this is how I understand this, but is that the truth? It's a bit like picking up the Daily Telegraph here in Australia, in Sydney. You know, if somebody says, I read that in the Telegraph. Well, is that the truth, or did you read it in the telly? Like, you just cannot trust the mainstream media. So who do you trust? Everybody then sort of dies back in, and they sort of hibernate a little bit, and they've got this narrow view of things that come up on your Facebook feed, which is such a
which is curated anyway.
Which is curated. Like, you've got this mad world. When I had my heart attack, you know, two things scared the life out of me. One was that I wouldn't be with my family, and I wouldn't be there to sort of, you know, help or encourage or assist or and be part of that. But the other thing was I've always had this thirst for knowledge, and I've always had a healthy cynicism about official views and whatnot, primarily because every time I've looked past official views, I found that there are, you know, dozens of other more logical or more suitable sort of solutions or commentary that smash the official position. So I'm probably getting a little bit off topic here, guys.
You're getting a little bit off microphone. That's what you're doing.
Off microphone, sorry.
Doing these ones, talking over like this.
There's no topic, mate.
Just bring it with you.
No topic.
Bring it with you.
Yeah.
You can even hold it if you really want it.
Yeah, really.
Or just
Yeah,
hold
okay.
that thing. Yeah.
Call it the shaft, I think.
Grip the shaft and point the thing towards you.
Yeah, right. I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, you know what? It's pointing down. There you go.
It's a big mic.
But you did bring up the particular humour that I used, and what annoyed me about all of that reaction was that it took away from real conversations about Indigenous people and the relationship to non-Indigenous people. And I mean, you know, I've had a lot to say on this show about Australia Day and that we should change the date and a lot of other things that a lot of people disagree with me on. You're right there, mate. Just flicking shit at me. Fucking hell. But, you know, and then I go out on stage and make jokes that a lot of people weren't happy about, but a lot of people were happy about, including Indigenous people. You know, where do you weigh it up? Obviously, me on stage is not actually my opinions, and I think this is where we get it confused for a lot of people in Australia, particularly with left-leaning comedians. Often their jokes and their style of humour has a political bias to it. Like they want to get their point across and they want to make real, you know, dramatic points, and that's not me. You know, my shit on stage is just the most either just whatever, just anything that's funny. You know, if people laugh, I'll tell it. You know, and these jokes aren't just me going out there and going, oh, let's just see if this works. It has worked. It does work. People find it funny, and that's why I tell it. But it does annoy me that people say, oh, well, that must be him. And I understand why people like that. I had this guy at the coffee shop the other day who wanted to fight me. The other day.
Where at?
Just down the road. Just yesterday. And I said, he's like, oh, you think you're funny? And I was like, oh, I'm
a comedian, so.
I said, mate, these are jokes, mate. He goes, yeah, well, you know, watch out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I said, mate, I'm telling you, I make these jokes about everyone. This isn't not just about your people.
Should have fucked him up.
Yeah. Well, this is not a fucking movie, Bluey. But I was pissed off because, like, I'd like to talk to that person. And I'd like to explain to that person that this is not reality.
See, you send out mixed signals. So you're a comedian. Right, let's laugh at ourselves. You know?
Sure.
I get that. That's you over here. But here you are now, and as you do regularly, you talk about really serious topics. So now you're a social commentator. So you're actually a social influencer. And so you're toggling between, you know, I'm just talking shit to now I'm talking serious. And people aren't sure exactly where you're sitting. So you might be making a joke, but they've watched your recent podcast, which was really sort of heartfelt and to the point and, you know, a really strong addition of your action. And now you're telling jokes.
Sure.
And I think there's just a little bit of confusion there sometimes, that's all.
I tell you where the difference lies. Am I on stage being a comedian or am I sitting here having a conversation? Like, if you're on stage and you walk into a comedy show and you see a comic up there, you enter into this contract.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That what is being said is not hateful. No one's trying to hurt you. No one's trying to harm you. It's all pretend. Like, you know, I say horrible things on stage. Like, if someone's, you know, yelling at me or whatever, I'll tell them to kill themselves. I'll do whatever. But I'll say it with a big smile on my face.
Kind of mean it.
Well, sometimes. If you really interrupted me show, I definitely mean it. But you know, like, and you can get away with those things because they've come in, they've entered into a contract and they've gone, okay, we're here to laugh. And maybe I need to make that more clearer during shows. I don't know. But Bluey made the good point that maybe you shouldn't put up that type of humour. And it's a shame, I feel.
I just, my point was, like, I think, like, do whatever you want at your shows. But that's at the show. People pay that money to see and hear that stuff. Clipping it and putting it on TikTok and Instagram is the issue for me.
Yeah.
My thing is, like if you go to a comedy show, it is a free for all. People know that. That's why they pay their money to see you. But when you cut it and put it on TikTok and that's when you're asking for trouble.
So what if I put it on YouTube, like as the whole show?
Might be different. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, but like you know that, like, TikTok and Instagrams, it's divisive. It's designed to be that. Yeah. And so when you know what I mean, like fucking said context, like, to the nth degree, but people know that when they come and see you. There wouldn't be many people at your shows that would watch that and go, blow up. But
no, there'd be
when that clip gets posted and it's out there for people to get upset about, that's when you're asking for trouble. That's all I reckon.
What's crazy is that a lot of people said, oh, you'd never make a joke about the Bali bombing. But I have a joke straight after that bit about the Bali bombing and about white Australian people. So it's just, I guess it is context. But I you know, as I said before, I wish I had that.
That's it. You've hit it on the head. And if you were an Indigenous person that was dragged away from your mother as a 2 or 3 year old screaming bubba, and you're just about to have a child yourself, put yourself in that space. There are tens of thousands of people all around Australia, Indigenous families, who felt that. And this is like a deep stain on their family story. And you could tell any joke you want, but as soon as you touch on that, it's a bit like the Holocaust.
But what about the Holocaust? What about 9/11? What about cancer? What about rape? What about all these things?
9/11 was a con in my view. Well, that's hardly the point.
I was waiting for that.
But, mate,
What about the Kennedy assassination? Let's talk about that. No, you can find a lot of things that are very offensive to a lot of people. Like, I've joked about the most heinous shit of all time on stage.
yeah, no, I think we're back to the point. We've already settled it. It's context. If you're trying to be a social commentator, people are listening to your considered opinions, and then you start dissing on a particular group, they feel that that's actually Isaac's view. And people are influenced by you. If you're up on stage, so it's context. It's context and place, and also recognise that there are some people out there. Like you think about my mother, your grandmother. She was an orphan when she was 5. Your parents died in World War II, and her mother died a couple of months later, and she's 5-6 years old, thrown in with the nuns on her own, wet in the bed and just in her own room and screaming the whole time. And so do a joke about orphans.
But I have done jokes about orphans.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is, just think about it's a bit when you write a letter. Anybody writes letters anymore?
No, I don't think I've ever written one time.
Well, let's say it's a business letter. Okay, maybe we've written some business letters.
You run a business. Have you ever written a business letter?
Scaffolding business, mate. Not many of us can write.
Please pay me.
But if you're trying to say something, you've got to look at it and you've got to say, well, what's the upside of me saying this? And I want to say it.
Yeah.
I feel I should be able to say it. What's the downside of me saying it? And so just consider things before they're said, and just say, well, no, actually, there's no real upside for me here, but there's a shitload of downside because there are, and I think it's just through ignorance. You didn't get taught any of this in school. I did, because I saw it in real life. I was part of that generation. And I became interested in it, and I've got many of my friends are Indigenous brothers and sisters, and their story is just so fucking painful.
Oh,
it's just so painful. But you don't understand that story, so you're off on your journey of understanding. And I think I hope the Indigenous brothers and sisters, have a little bit of a space in their heart for you to go off and learn about. Rob Thomas,
Matchbox 20.
Matchbox 20.
He fucked up.
He fucked up.
What did he say?
This was years ago. He made a joke at a concert. Well, it was off the cuff kind of comment at a concert. It was a few years ago now.
Yeah. And anyway, he just got pumped, and he's a pommy, isn't he?
He's a Yank.
He's a Yank. So, and he's just come out and said, I had no idea that this was going on here. And
It's just an off the cuff sort of racist comment.
Yeah.
It was about getting drunk as like black Australian drunk or something. Like
Yeah.
Black, drunk to
I don't
like
think you
black
should say
Australian
that.
drunk. Well, that's what he said.
You're lucky. I'm going to clip that.
But what he eventually did was, in order to atone, he didn't come out and just mag on about some mad apology. He came out and said, going forward, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to get to know some Indigenous brothers and sisters, and I want to learn their story. This is the oldest civilization on the planet, and I want to know a little bit more, given how ignorant I am. And so he's now got a number of contacts here in Australia, and when he comes out here, he sort of hangs with them, and he goes out and does different things, and he just learns. And I think, like, we've all got so much to learn. When I said after the heart attack, the second thing I was worried about was that I wouldn't have the time to learn all the things that I should know. And now I've spent a couple of years at home and books and writing stuff and chasing rabbits down holes, and I've learned a shitload. I'm a lot more enlightened than I ever was 3 or 4 years ago, and that's crucial. Yet I'm an inquiring mind all the time. But unfortunately, we all get stuck in our debt position. We want a Rip Curls T-shirt, rather than getting a blank T-shirt from Target for $5, we want a Rip Curl one.
You are wearing a Billabong T-shirt at the moment. I'd like to point that out.
That's because he works hard.
No, that's because my darling buys me all the good stuff.
Yeah, fair enough.
But people are just spending money. They want cars and all that, so they get in debt. And now, with money not going up, that is wages, they are literally getting up in the dark, going to work, getting in massive traffic, stressed, fumes, going to certainly a non-democratic workplace where they're treated, they're tyrants, or want them to do this, I don't give a shit, this and this. Thankfully, there's some sort of health and safety sort of laws they have to keep up with. Then at the end of the afternoon, they've done nothing with their family, they've done nothing all day. They then get in the same queue to go home, along with the same mugs, all going the same way. And for many of them, it's because they have got themselves into debt, or they haven't learnt about finances. If you think about the biggest things that impact us on a daily basis, obviously relationships are crucial, our health is crucial, but the one thing that we have here in Australia is the financial system, and they can exacerbate damaging relationship issues or health issues. And I know for a fact, if you think about the biology, the physiology of hormones, if you wake up every morning, say it's 6 o'clock, and it's beep beep beep, get up, you've been worrying all night, tossing and turning about, you've got bills coming up, not sure how you're going to pay, you got little Johnny wants to go on that trip, and you want to get him new footy boots, and you've got 3 or 4 kids, and they're going to cost you, you're going to have to sell one of the kids, and all that. You've got all of those issues. You wake up in the morning, and very quickly, boom, 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 it's all going through your head. And cortisol, it's a bit like adrenaline, cortisol, but it's the negative sort of hormone. Now, cortisol will constrict your blood vessels. That's why there is an epidemic of high blood pressure, because it's the physiology. You're just thinking bad thoughts. Oh, shit, how am I going to pay this? I have to get in the car. I'm fucking late, all this sort of stuff. And you're doing that all day, and that cortisol is just coursing through. Now, you do that for a day or two, you'll feel pretty crap. You do that for 5, 10 years, you do that for 25 years, 30 years, you fall apart. And this is where we are. And I think human nature, if you think of all little kiddies, they're all angels. They all start off as angels, and then they get exposed to the real world. They get exposed to the messaging and the understanding. And there's that little black boy is not as good as me, apparently, and all these sorts of things. And so they pick all this stuff up, and then they turn into arseholes at some point. Now, that may be because their parents, so this is an intergenerational thing, where the parents from my generation, the schooling wasn't that great. There wasn't a lot of support through the government. There wasn't a lot of public services and things like that. So a lot of those kids became bums like their mum and dad. Then they go off and get girls pregnant, and now they've got another 3 or 4 kids. They're not really mentors because they never had mentors themselves, because perhaps they came from a broken home or whatever. And this just goes on for generation after generation. And so you have all of these kids who are missing out on so much. And most in society say, well, no, he's a little rat bag, forget him, or lock him up, or put him in the boys' home, or do something severe. Well, mate, survival instincts will just ensure that you fight back. And we have all the disaffected youth all around Australia. The Alice Springs is just a microcosm of, there's plenty of little white and yellow boys here in Sydney and Newcastle that are also feeling, how the fuck am I going to make a quid? How am I going to have a family? I can't buy a home. My parents were always struggling. It's just struggle. And that is primarily because of this huge financial shift from the bottom of the pyramid, as it were, to the top. It's well known that during the COVID, am I allowed to say that? During the COVID period?
We've got the sticker.
It's already been said.
We've got the sticker.
The sticker's on.
We've got it.
Okay.
Go your hardest.
That it was the greatest wealth transfer from those who don't have it to those who have it in human history. And the Warren Buffetts and blokes you talked about earlier, and that they doubled their wealth, whereas most other people went backwards. So there are lots of issues that are bubbling all the time. I don't see, you look in the prisons, for example. In the US, it's just ridiculous. They've gone to private prisons. So it's in the interest of the local senator who's got the jail in his electorate, and he's getting $200,000 or $300,000 a year to support that private institution, and so he changes the laws. Two or three strikes, bloke's got a little joint. Well, mate, that's your third strike. 15 years.
That's insidious, isn't it? It's like, okay, let's not fix up the parks.
They're incentivized to...
Yeah, well, let's not make marijuana legal. Let's not do this. Hey, if you're caught with this amount, put him away. Let's not fix up the housing problems. Let's not fix up domestic violence, because these are all going to lead to having more customers.
Wasn't that one of Biden's things that he ran on? They were going to, non-violent drug offenders were going to get pardoned?
Well, I think in LA at the moment, you can go, if you steal from a shop and it's under $1,000, you don't get charged.
Yeah, they've just stopped caring, I think.
Like, it's mad because the prisons are just so chockers at the moment. But on your point about disaffected youth, I think at the moment it's all about Alice Springs, but it is everywhere. It's young people of all different colours. It doesn't matter what colour of skin you have. Like, there are people who are they're breaking into cars, they're doing shit, they're doing drugs, they're doing nangs, they don't give a fuck, they're just doing whatever they're doing because they've got nothing. Nothing's driving them forward. They don't see a way out. They were born into a household where mum and dad get home and they're super stressed, as you said, and the only way they know how to treat it is to sink piss and smoke drugs. And that's every night. And then that's the exact same path that they'll follow as you talk about cortisol levels. That'll pump up, and the only way they'll be able to deal with them, with those levels of stress and anxiety, is anti-anxiolytics like alcohol, like drugs. They fight it, and they teach their kids to do the exact same, and the circle of life continues. Doesn't matter about race. It just comes down to people. It just comes down to the human species needs to have some sort of something to reach for.
Yeah, the human species, I think, at its core, bonobos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bonobos are our closest...
They're chimps.
Primates.
No, they're bonobos. Chimps are chimps.
And they are the most... They like rescue greyhounds.
Uh-oh.
They are the most caring.
Oh, you got his attention?
Yeah.
Please, go on.
And these bonobos have been sort of looked at and studied and all the rest of it. And it challenges the concept that, the reason we go to war and that is because, mate, human beings at their core are fucking aggressive and they're fucking this and they're that, and that's how you need to be. And if you're going to win in business, well, you've got to fucking rip this bloke off and you've got to take this bloke on, you've got to do X and Y. And so everybody's on edge.
It does look like you, Bluey.
Yeah. It's actually scary. It's one of the lookalikes.
Yeah.
I don't think because you run into so many beautiful people, and then but across the human continuum, you've got people who are a bit slower, people who are sharper and whatnot, but you also got psychological sort of issues. You've got the psychopaths and the sociopaths and whatnot, and they tend to represent as CEOs and things like that because they're fucking aggressive and they don't give a shit about their workers and they're this and that, and they can put on this beautiful face as soon as they get in front of a camera and appear caring and feeling and all this. These are the different types you've got out there, and so it just confuses everybody. But the thing for me is school is not doing the job it should do for the people. If you think of, what's his name, bloke at Dewey, Dewey Decimal System, yeah.
I thought you were going to talk about Jews then. I was like,
No. We're not going there.
Jesus
We're not going
Christ.
there. But he went
Dewey, Ben Shapiro.
Not the JM.
at the turn of the 20th century. He and a group of other American sort of education people all went to Germany. As I mentioned, Germany was this really sort of burgeoning, clever place, and they nailed it around psychology and education and all this sort of thing. And what they learned over there was that the Germans had the perfect system. Because they understood psychoanalysis and all this sort of stuff, they knew how to shape people. And so their education system was literally put together not so much to encourage creativity or individualism and all this sort of thing. It was about conditioning them into a lane, and it was all about, because it was, at that point it was still run by the aristocracy and big business, and so all they wanted their kiddies to do and learn was to be good units of production. So kids are taught really basic stuff. Most importantly, they're told to conform. Wear these shoes, stand in this line, do as you're told, come out. Now that's all conditioning. So that when you go to work, you're not questioning the boss. No, we think we can do this better, or why are we doing this, or why don't we do that? We don't want any of those cheeky bastards. They become problems, which is why they get kicked out of school and whatnot, because they question or they ask or they're not engaged. And so he took it back to the US, and we picked up the same system. And certainly in New South Wales here, there was, I think, one of those creepy Opus Dei sort of schools that had tried to teach the kids something a little bit outside the curriculum, which I think there are many areas. We talked about goal setting and diet and understanding basic physiology, these important things which are life and survival skills, growing food, for example. And they got a massive kick in the arse, and they said, mate, you'll be getting no funding, and there's a chance we'll breach you guys if you don't stick exactly to this system, this curriculum that we have given you. So, of course, they've gone back. They got a slap on the head, and now they're teaching the kids exactly. But I've had my five sons go to school, and the common thread I get is that they kill your spirit. Nothing's engaging, nothing's interesting, and for those other people who I know who are creative too, sons of other friends and whatnot, it just hasn't worked for them. And if they have a little bit of spirit at all, the teachers try and bash it out of them. They don't bash them these days, of course. They
should.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should. But I guess my point is that we're relying on school to do all this, babysitting and set the kids up. But I think there's a real important role for parents, and again, this importance of mentors and mums and dads who are taking an interest and saying, well, school is this sort of crap you need to learn in order so they can scale you on whether you go to uni or not. But there are all these other things you need to learn, and let's go out in the veggie patch. Let's learn how to grow food. Let's go down the park. Let's do some breathing. Let's do a little bit of meditation. Get in a bit of spirituality. So none of this stuff is done at school, and consequently, kids don't know how to deal with the stress. I never knew how to deal with the stress, even though I'd played, professional sport for a long time, and it wasn't until I had that break. And I think everybody who gets to 50 needs to have a couple of years off. Because you literally got your head down, ass up from 18, 17, 18, head down, ass up, and you are sprinting for decades. And you don't know where you're fucking going, and occasionally get up and there's a couple of big moments, a big night on the piss, and we're going to do this, and then we're back into it again. And you wake up one day, 5 years are gone. And where am I really going? What am I trying to really achieve here? What am I, what sort of legacy perhaps am I trying to leave? What message should I send to my kids that will give them a greater capacity to deal with the challenges ahead, the challenges that I'm starting to see are going to be far greater than our generation. Anyway, I'm monopolising the conversation.
It's outstanding, mate.
This
is fucking gold.
Earlier on in the podcast, I said you know a lot about everything. This is my point.
This is gold.
This is my point.
No, I don't. Well, it's easy to know more than you fucking do.
Hang on, he said you, as in, what did you say?
I think he meant use.
Yeah, he said use. You started laughing before he added the plural to that, so that's just fucking...
Yes, goobers.
Well, he's hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail. Well, mate, I'd hope you would. You're an intelligent person. You're very well read. But I'm thankful that kids have access to the internet, and that's where school's not going to change, not under any government in the future, that's for sure. It's just, you're 4 years in a term. They're not going to change. People would freak out if they tried to change it. But thankfully, we have the internet for people to... Because I was never really interested in school at all. I just never was.
You never read a book.
I know.
In school.
But I just wasn't interested in. Mm-hmm. But once I got older, I started to go... Because I think if I could have gone to uni straight out of school and I would have just it would have been a waste of time. I think university is a waste of time for a lot of career paths.
Yeah.
But if I was to do that, I think I would have to wait until I'm at least 30 to do it.
That's when I did it.
That's when you did it, because you're actually an adult. You actually understand how the world works to an extent. You are a whole lot more mature than the person you were at 18 years old. And I think possibly one of the worst things that you can do as a young person is decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life at 17, at 18.
Lock yourself into a $100,000 hex debt and a career at 18. When
At
you're
18. Like
your ass from your elbow. Like.
And it's the same for even for tradies. Like if you get a trade at 16 and you commit 4 years, or even at 15, for 4 years you're a trades, or you're doing your apprenticeship, all of a sudden you're on good cash. Like you're not going to go back and go, oh, I should have done plumbing.
I disagree with that a little bit, because that's a skill.
Sure.
That's a tangible, measurable income. Like, so I've got heaps of mates. Like, mate right now is about to become a teacher, but he's a plumber. Like, so he's got his plumbing trade. He's always going to have that to fall back on.
Yeah.
So I know what you're saying. Like, some bloke's just going to be a plumber for
it would
50
be a
years.
risk. It'd be a risk to go, I'm going to go back and not make any money for a while, like back to square one, if you will, and go to uni.
Yeah. Or you can do it online. Like, he's doing it online.
No,
I know what you're saying. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a risk. It's like, okay, shit, do I just go back and make no money or barely any money for a little bit, maybe work on the weekends, a couple of cashies, and then put all of my extra time into this? I've already done the hard yards. I should just be... So I just think that doing that at a young age is a risk. Now, obviously, I've fallen into some luck here with my career, but... I don't know how long it's going to last, so I've got to make sure that it could last for another 5 minutes, another 5 years, another 5 decades. Who the fuck knows, right? But I've got to make sure that I put enough things in place, whether it's other businesses, whether it's investments, whatever, or education, so that I can have a career afterwards, much like with footballers or sports people or whatever, or any. You see a lot of these people who once were, a singer or famous for whatever. They always are just hanging around. Mm-hmm. They're never really doing anything else because they're fearful of going back into the real world. And I think that's, I've always said to Claire, I was like, listen, if this falls over tomorrow, I'll just go get a job. Like, let's just do it. We've got to make money. We've got to pay for the house. We've got to pay for the little fella who's coming along. But I think a lot of people just aren't willing to do that in my position, if you will. But back to the young kids, I just think that making that decision at such a young age, and that's why I think gap years are great. Gap decades are even better. Like, just go out, see the world. Like, this is all things that we spoke about when I was young. Go and see the world. All these things that I wanted to do, but it took time. And I think that's something built into me. I think you're pretty similar to it as well, Dad, where unless it's your idea, you won't do it.
No, that's you can't be buying into someone else's dream. You've got to have your own dream and follow that path. And as much as somebody else wants to encourage you, unless it comes out of your own mind.
It's got to be that you have to self-motivate and you have to be the one to set the goals. And it's all well and good to have people tell you this is a good idea, but it's like you with making videos, Blue.
Yeah.
I can tell you until the cows come home it's a great career and you should do it.
Yeah.
But unless you want to do it, then you won't do it. Or going to the gym or eating well, whatever it is. Unless you're willing to do those things.
Passion.
You got to have passion. You got to have belief in it too. You got to believe that it can work. Like life is all about these small wins and these tiny little increments of things that you do right, and they lead up to something good, and you can sort of track back. If I go back to my biggest wins that I've had in this part of my career, I always say, like the Enmore Theatre Show, and there was 2,000 people there. I can track back every single tiny small win that got to that point. Yeah. It didn't just happen. It's like you playing footy. You can go back to every small thing that you did. You with your business, with whatever. Gabe making $300,000 a year working for me,
roughly, yeah.
All of those can be measured after tax, of course. He's paying bigger BAS statements than me. It's been a pretty serious podcast.
Yeah.
Bluey, you want to talk about some...
Well, it's been good. It's good.
It's good.
It's very good.
You called me... what did you call me?
Disappointment?
No, not a disappointment. That was before the show. About the Indigenous joke that I had. You said it was because I wasn't...
ignorant.
Ignorant. Okay.
No, you've got a journey to go on.
Yeah, but I think if I knew those horrible things, which I know some of them, and
You
I
know
wanna
of
learn.
them.
I know of. I don't know.
No, I'm saying like we know
of them, and this is one of the things I wanted to say about the schooling is we get taught with Indigenous culture. We get taught about the dream time, and that's all well and good. But what about actual experiences? It's all well and good to hear about these things, but what about and it comes back to what you said about who writes the history.
Yeah.
Like, why are we not learning about what happened to this part of this Indigenous culture in Botany Bay when the whiteys turned up? Why don't we hear about that, their point of view? Why can't we allow people to make up their own opinions about what take on all the evidence and then come up with their own opinions of what actually happened?
Just a quick one on that. One thing I found is that because we've gone to tech is a sort of a medium where if you're on your phone, like it's hard to read a book on your phone.
Kindles and that are no good.
Yeah. So we've gone away from books, and you can find a great book written by a really accomplished writer who challenges various conventions or has theories about how this went out and played and whatnot, and it could blow your mind. But no one's going to the bookstores. Bookstores are just closing. So it ends up with, rather than a deep sort of knowledge of the issue and various other sort of colourings around it, you have this one sort of nice little position. You go, okay, I now know about that. I can write that in a paragraph. And in most issues through history, they are incredibly complex, and there are so many contributing factors and all the rest of it, that if you don't know that, you don't know how it all evolves. You just simply know the end point. And if you don't read books, then you don't get all that body. And that's where I think, whilst technology is good because you've got access to stuff, it tends to make for a much more sort of hybridised, very sort of summarised version.
More
of
shallow understanding.
Yeah. It's like the audiobooks. Like, as well, they're quite nice, but I don't think they're the same as actually reading
To
something.
sit and actually read something and like digest it and like wrestle with it physically, look at it. It's completely different.
It's difficult. It's difficult to sit there and read an entire book.
Yeah.
Like, I think that with the book that I'm working on, we were speaking about this last week, Jones, the book that I'm working on, I'm really excited for people to have that as the first book they read.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people, I have people come to my shows and like, this is the first comedy event that I've been to. Like, how great's that? I want this to be the first book that they've read, The last thing I'll say about the Indigenous thing was, I think even if I knew all the ins and outs, I still think you can make jokes about atrocities.
If it's balanced, you don't just load up on one gang.
Sure.
I think if it's balanced, otherwise people go, well, why do you keep telling fucking jokes about us?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to spread this out.
But that goes back to what you said about pumping it all together in a 1 minute clip.
Yeah. That's all people see. But like you've said before, that section of the set was you were teeing off on everyone, but all that got clipped was what got clipped, and
so
still recognising that there will be joy, but there will be sections of the market who will be so offended. Like I know someone personally whose father, who was a world champion athlete, and he was stolen as a kid, sent up to Kempsey, up to the Conchilla mission up there as a 4 or 5 year old boy. How he went on to be a world champion, I'll never know. But even as an old man, and he's passed away now, he just couldn't get over it. He's just and so his son and daughter, or daughter-in-law in this case, like just hold on to that story and that emotion. And so as soon as you pop that one out, even though they're actually friends of yours, she nearly fainted. Was the story I got. It was just too close to home from a friend. And doesn't Isaac? Well, of course, Isaac doesn't know that this was your story. He's just ignorant of those sensibilities. And so, I think when you're going to be telling jokes that are close to the bone, have a little bit of a think about it. Think about the ramifications, and back to that sort of letter writing sort of approach. Where's the benefit that I say that? I want to say that, and I'm a comedian. I should be able to say fucking anything I want. But there will be a demographic out there, a cohort that will be gutted. And do you really want to do that? Because your thing is actually trying to make the world laugh, which is a beautiful sort of ambition.
I don't know if I'm trying to make everyone laugh because that's impossible.
Yeah,
because
right.
people are going to be offended at, that's what I said.
I was a bit
before.
carried away there.
No, but I did. I used to think that. I used to literally think that I want to make everyone laugh, make this, but it's impossible. You can't. People will be offended by everything, and that's the problem when you take on topics where they're currently popular. You take on the transgender topic, people are going to be gutted about that. You take on LGBT people, the feminism, whatever. I don't know. I completely understand where you're coming from. And to hurt people is definitely not what the whole point of the joke is.
No,
That's not it at all.
Well, that's not your style either.
No, and when people know who I am, and I've spoken to Indigenous people post that, and I've been met with mixed responses, and I get that. And that's, I think when you try to look at a comedian and say they're a piece of shit because they said something that you deemed to be racist, and they were racist jokes, well, at least they're racial jokes. I don't think you can look at comics and say that they're bad people because of that. But it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, it was a bit like when you did after the Christchurch
Yeah.
shooting. It was, the timing was a bit close perhaps or whatever.
I actually told that joke 2 weeks after it happened, and then I didn't get in trouble for it for a year. So
Yeah.
that was lucky.
Yeah. So timing's important. Timing's important here. And particularly at the moment, the Indige brothers and sisters have been getting the shit kicked out of them for 220 years. They're living in fucking hovels. They get no proper education. This is a portion of them.
Yeah.
There are many successful Indigenous people, of course. But a lot of their community have just been left behind, and there are these really serious issues bordering on genocide, which sit with generation and generation of kids. And they hear these stories because Indigenous more so than the white fella tend to share those stories down through the ages, and so their response is going to be a lot more visceral than perhaps you'd get from some goober white boy who doesn't know his fucking history and doesn't give a fuck about anything other than himself, kind of thing. But anyway, We've had a crack at that.
Yeah,
That's good.
Anyway, it's one of those things where, I think there's more positive things that I can do than negative things that I can do in this whole sort of journey that I'm on the old social media, and I think I'll continue to sort of pump that out.
But apologies are shallow.
But I'm not. I wouldn't apologise for that.
Because if you say that, it's just because you've lost a sponsor
course.
or you've upset some. It's hurt your algorithms. I think the people who've been hurt out there would prefer that you take a genuine approach and say, I actually need to understand the story because perhaps I misspoke or perhaps I didn't understand the sensitivity of these sorts of views and the actual raw history. And to say those jokes now that I understand, the damage that's done and wreaked through generations of kids and families, and now I understand. Now, and that will, the only way to do that is to go out there and meet with people, understand their position, and as I said, go off on your journey to understand where you got it wrong.
I still think you can tell those jokes though.
Well, no, that's another topic because it's all about just the sanctity of everyone being able to laugh at themselves, and I think everybody, shouldn't be so centric that nobody can make a joke about you.
Yeah.
Imagine if everyone in the room got a joke about them and nobody told a joke about me. I'm saying, well, what about fucking me?
Well, this is what I get from autistic people because I do a bit about autism.
Yeah.
And I get at least 1 or 2 or 3 people every show thanking me for doing jokes about autism because no one ever does it. Yeah. And I don't think that any group of people are, they should be saved or sacred people because of who they are, whether they're autistic or whether they're Down syndrome or whatever. I think you just can make jokes about absolutely anyone. Anyway,
Talking about making jokes.
Talking about making jokes, Bluey.
People keep sending me lookalikes.
Yeah. What do you got?
Of me.
Yeah.
Have you got? I'll give Gabe a couple of seconds to get them up.
Now, I've seen these, and they are...
They're all hideous. They're all from Mardi Gras too. Which
So this is from Triple J. Triples, Jones, you might want to put your Elton John glasses on here.
that's
you see
from
that?
Mardi Gras. The guy on the right. People keep. I got like
Can you zoom in
5
on
over
that,
the weekend.
Gabe? Who said this is you?
The guy on the right's
That does look, the closer you get, that does look like you.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty close.
That's pretty
Oh,
good.
God.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, I keep getting sent in, and like, there's been a few.
A couple of DMs.
They're all super camp, and they all kind of look like me too.
Is that from your phone?
Because
There's a few DMs.
no,
in there
that's the screenshot from the guy who
There's a
sent it
bit
to
of
me.
inbox action going on there.
Oh, yeah,
Someone-
inbox is chock-a-block.
He's a bit dodgy, I think.
Just full of
I'll
lookalikes.
see if I can grab another one.
Grab
Yeah.
some other ones as we go.
But yeah, I keep getting sent lookalikes, which is great.
That is great. Well
Yeah.
done.
Lot of me walking around Mardi Gras on the weekend, apparently.
Big weekend for the gays.
Yeah,
Big weekend, getting out and getting after it in Sydney. There, I saw.
it's just a big party, isn't it?
oh,
Is it? I don't know. It just
yeah,
looks like
yeah.
everyone's just getting fucked up and having a good time.
We're getting fucked. And I think someone was saying that it goes through to next Saturday.
It goes for 2 weeks, I think.
That's too much.
That's a lot.
That's quite a bit, to be honest.
Good party.
That's a lot of tissues.
It's a lot of jelly. It's a lot of
A lot of KY.
Lube.
petroleum jelly.
Have you ever been? Have you ever been to Mardi Gras?
No,
Never been.
I've never been on a float. Jones,
No, though I have some very close
very close.
gay friends and whatnot. I think they're beautiful. I was once a little bit sort of homophobic
As was I actually, and
growing up.
I
But,
grew up and I was like, why
yeah,
the fuck do I care?
no. It's well, particularly in rugby league, professional sport. What's that?
There's another one that I got sent. Someone that looks like me.
I don't see that one at all.
I don't think
reckon
it's bad.
I reckon this one's the best.
That Gabe likes. I don't mind that one. He's gay and German. Apparently, he's got the Oktoberfest gear on.
I think it's the eyes.
I don't mind that. That's
Two
all right.
black eyes.
Yeah, looks like he hasn't been to bed for a while. So I think that's the resemblance there. Yeah,
No, big fan of the gays on this show. We love the gays.
yeah. Looks like a lot of fun.
The lesbians and the trans, not so much.
Not so much.
You're no, we're cool. I think it's weird that the trans and the others are all in on board with the gays, because gay men are just blokes who like blokes. Why are they them's in there, Josh?
It's just all one thing, isn't it?
But why is it?
I don't know. I don't know why it gets painted as
Isn't
one.
it weird that it's one thing?
They're all very different crews.
Oh, they're so different. It's strange to put them all together. It's like having a class of other.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me that it's all.
LGBTIQ plus.
It's a long one.
Well, they have all been, because normal has been thrust upon us. This is what normal is.
It's the same with skin-coloured pencils. I never thought about that up until recently.
What's that?
Where's you going with that?
You know how
Like cream-coloured.
Skin-coloured what colour's a skin-coloured pencul?
Oh, like whose skin?
Yeah, exactly. Like skin-coloured pencils. That's not a gay euphemism.
The old skin.
Gay skin-coloured pencil, please. A skin-coloured pencil is something we'd have at primary school, and you'd colour in with it, and you'd say, "Oh, throw us the skin-coloured pencil." This does sound like a fucking euphemism, doesn't it?
The more you say it, the gayer it sounds.
But it's something you don't think about until you get a bit older, like with the homophobia and all that type of stuff. You go, "Oh, that's a bit."
writing a letter with the skin coloured pencil.
If you were a black person and you said, "Where's the skin-coloured pencil?" Look, see your skin colour.
Yeah, nice.
There's see that colour. That is skin colour.
That's looks like something girls do on their lips or whatever, isn't it?
It's not just girls, mate.
Blokes, whatever. I've had a crack at it. Yeah, it's a bit sharp.
What it would be remiss not to talk about football a little bit, Bluey. You would have some footy questions for old Jones.
Yeah, I could sit here all day and talk footy.
We're talking about Mardi Gras going for 2 weeks. What about post grand final celebrations? That we went for a week and a half, didn't it?
So for anyone that's not familiar with who and what you've achieved and who you are, obviously aside from Isaac's dad,
It's a big achievement, by the way.
yeah, I mean that's obviously
That's
top
huge.
of the mantle, but
Congratulations.
won a premiership with the Newcastle Knights in 1997,
And from all reports, partied for some time.
as you should.
Yeah, no, we did. Professional sport, at the time you think it's all. That's literally what life's about because you've worked so hard to get there and from a young age. But you come to realise that it's a little bit of just part of your journey, and I don't think too much about football anymore.
You do treat it like a war. You don't talk about it much. It's like you went to war.
Oh, no, it was in those days. It was scary shit. Blokes were incredibly aggressive. You had to be at that level of performance, and so your mind had to get into that state. You couldn't just be having a crack on a couple of jokes in the dressing room and say, the game started, let's go. Otherwise, you get damaged. But there were a lot of really a lot of gunslingers out there. Everybody wanted to take everyone's block off, and I was one of those blokes who tried to be a really fair guy. That was how I was taught. That was how Dad sort of encouraged us all to think about different things, and so for me it was just if somebody then didn't follow that theme, if they wanted to go outside the boundaries, outside the rules, and hit me high or do something cheap, then I'd just lose it, and I'd go pretty hard then. But otherwise, I just enjoyed playing and playing with a group of guys at a real high intensity level. But the big issue was injuries. I had literally every week. We talk about your brother, my son, Jonas, number 3 boy in the Butterfield clan. He's loving his footy and thinks about it.
Great player.
Deeply. Great. He's a great player and may go on to be something in the scheme of things in the professional sport. But when I debate this with your mother, and I said, Darla, do you remember how sort of just rat shit I'd come home like after every game? And this is like 28 to 30 games a year, and you would come home with broken thumbs, broken fingers, torn hamstrings, broken arms, broken legs, broken jaws, broken cheekbones, concussions. And when you didn't have any of those, you came home pissed.
Or a nice combination
of
the two.
Yeah. And it actually just as an aside, it makes me think just why some of those players were actually mad when we went out on the piss. Because in those days, the doctor would come around after the game and, you're cut and bloodied and all the rest of it, and he'd ask the question, as he had to do, how you feeling, you all right? And everyone to a man, it was just, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because if you said you were a crook, or maybe I took a bit of a knock, or maybe, the knee's a bit sore, right, no drink for you. So you just go around, all these blokes are busted, and everyone's fine to go to the pub.
100%. Well, especially after a win. You're not missing out on that. That's
you can sneak away after a loss, but after a win, if you don't turn up, it's a bit of a...
it's just the best beer ever.
But it was, the whole idea of sort of playing with guys about something you're really passionate about. And I think, that's the overriding theme, that passion about doing something that you really want to do, or something that you're really invested in. And I was incredibly invested in it. I became more so as I got older and started to adopt sort of more leadership positions. So I sort of played through to about 35 and in the front row. And I actually started getting the shits hanging out with Johnsies and all of these, because you'd sit down on the bus with them and you might want to talk about, you hear there's this invasion or that, the Gulf War or something, or there was something big in politics, and they wouldn't have a clue. Wouldn't have a clue, wouldn't care, all the rest of it. And, they just want to know, who's your tip in the third. and we drive down to games, listen to horse racing and whatnot. These blokes had sort of too much money, but I was glad to get out of it ultimately, in reasonable health, but many injuries. I've been fortunate enough after sort of doing a lot of research and trying to understand how to deal with diet and spirituality, and I find the spirituality allows me to calm myself down, and using a lot of Wim Hof tactics. I don't know if you know Wim Hof, the breathing, the guy, and
definitely.
I've been doing those for 3 or 4 years now, the hypothesis around it, because I was looking into what caused all the pain in the body, what causes heart attacks. It's inflammation. What causes cancer? Inflammation. So it's the inflammatory diseases that we haven't really got to the heart of. Generally speaking, infectious diseases we've done pretty well in, but inflammation, and so it's got a lot to do with your diet, a lot to do with your stress levels, which have just been peaking over the last few decades. But it's also got a lot to do with how you breathe. And if you're, for example, travel down the freeway, you could go for 20 minutes and you're the shallowest of breathings, because you don't need a lot of oxygen to energise and the muscles and all the rest of it. But that builds up a sort of more acidic sort of state of your body through the different combinations of the carbon dioxide and the oxygen. So if you do that all the time, and we're sitting here, and let's say we just and we don't do one deep breath, nothing diaphragmatic right down into the guts for 2 hours, you will become more acidic, and an acidic sort of profile in your body is an inflammatory profile, and so you will be more inflamed. Anyway, so that led me down this path of Wim Hof. He's a Norwegian, had these really difficult times with his family. His wife committed suicide, jumped off a building. He just couldn't get it out of his head. He just couldn't function for years. He had 3 young kids, and someone said, "Mate, go and sit in the ice. You can't think about anything in the ice." And that was crucial to him, because it was the ability to not think about anything. And anybody listening to this, try and think about the last time you thought about nothing. And if you can do that, and it becomes a discipline, because every time you think about nothing, something will come into your head.
That's where people lose interest in trying to pursue meditation, because you're trying to clear your head of anything, but all you can think about is something.
Yeah. And it's a skill like anything. You just got to learn that, okay, something's intruding into my head. I just try and find whatever colour, particularly if I'm facing the sun in the morning, it'll be sort of an orange underneath my eyelids, and I'll just focus on that orange light, and that will then take me away. And just clearing the mind for a small period of time. But that's more on the sort of the transcendental sort of level.
Have you tried it in the ice?
Hey?
Have you tried the ice?
During winter, I just sit in the pool for 4 or 5 minutes, and it's freezing, and it just sparks your body. It just wakes you up. I haven't had a warm shower in maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, I don't have hot showers anymore. I'm probably about the same, maybe a little bit longer.
It's just cold, and you stand there and you get the breathing going, and because it braces you as soon as you get hit, and then you just find this sort of zone where you can calm down and bring your pulse rate down and all the rest of it. But that was part of tie that into the breathing, which actually dealt with the acidity versus alkalinity. And so it's understood that the alkalinity is a non-inflammatory state. So how do I get myself from an inflammatory state into a non-inflammatory state, an alkaline state? And this Wim Hof talks about this breathing. And so I tried it for a while, and the idea was, because I've got all these injuries, knees, blue ankles, blue backs, blue shoulders, blue necks, you name it, thumbs. And after about 3 or 4 months of this breathing practice, where basically I deep breathe 5 or 6 minutes, and then I just breathe out.
You hold.
And I don't hold anything. I just don't breathe in.
That's what I mean. You hold without taking a breath.
I don't breathe in. So, but the 4 or 5 minutes really oxygenates me. You start to get a bit high. You start feeling your fingers tingling. All your cells are oxygenated. Then you breathe out. And I don't breathe in for, this morning I didn't breathe in for like 6.5 minutes. Now that changes your body chemistry, the ratios of carbon dioxide to oxygen. And the hypothesis was that it would turn me into a non-inflammatory state. Now, the only way to prove that, I don't know if there's a blood test for that or whatever, was to then, after I do my meditation in the morning out on the bluff, I then go for this sort of 10K walk. And I found one morning, all of a sudden, I've got no pain. Everything had gone. I've got no pain now.
I know one interesting one was an injury you had to your neck, which led to a bit of tingling sensation in your radial fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Is that still all there?
No. The inflammation is sort of, because that was just a sort of a pinch of the nerves that came out
this
of
is
there.
what I'm thinking. Did that help that?
Yeah. So I don't take, Brufen and all these things that anti-inflammatories.
What's proof?
Brufen.
Ibuprofen.
Well, whatever. It used to be called Brufen.
Oh, I was gonna
Anyway.
say, you've nailed everything else in this podcast, but ibuprofen's escaped you.
Yeah, no, that's an old version. But
Fair enough.
so I don't take any of those. And I just found one day, as I started my walk, I'm thinking, shit, I don't have any pain at all. And then I just kept going. And to this day, although I've got this little issue because I sleep a certain way, and every morning I find this shoulders are dislocated, and so I go to Bluey's.
Yeah.
The other Bluey.
The other Bluey.
Yeah.
The original. The original and the best.
I know Bluey.
And he'll just sort of go pop and it's back in.
Yeah.
So
Pop a
it
couple of your
works.
fingers as well. And
Oh, yeah, he's always popping fingers.
Is he a
and-
reflexologist? Is that that's the
I got no idea.
Mate,
That's his area?
He's everything. But the thing I found going through sports medicine was you literally got to shop around. Physios, mate, by and large, wouldn't give two bob for. It costs you a fortune. They line you up with about 20 other people, put a heat little bottle on you, maybe a little red light, walk away, charges $60. Nothing happens. So what I found was a combination of a bit of chiro, remedial massage was crucial. So the chiro sort of loosened a lot of the tension and articulated the bones better.
I think the good physios are mainly what they do is remedial massage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they know where to get in. They know where the trigger spots are. And this is what Bluey knows. Bluey knows all of this stuff. He's got all of this other sort of knowledge, which is – and that's probably one of the issues with – because medicine is such a specialised, you're a dentist, you're a physio, you're a GP. You learn this stuff. And that stuff is the only stuff you're allowed to practice on. You might know a little bit, like take, for example, cortisol. We talked cortisol. So if you go to a doctor and you present with high blood pressure, the doctor will say, I'll give you a tablet for that. That's what they do. That's there you go. But you might say, well, is there anything that's at the root of this high blood pressure? Oh, I don't fucking know. I don't understand diet. We didn't get taught that. I'm not allowed to teach diet or talk about diet. What about the physiology? What about the hormones and that sort of thing, the cortisol, the damage that's doing through the stress of work and maybe relationship dramas or things like this? Doctors don't know that. They have this very defined space, and they go, mate, if I can't give you a drug.
Well, that's all they are. They're just the link in the chain to pharmacy.
That they are, which is why you got to go out. And I found I'd be going to osteopaths and then finally I'd find somebody who actually knew what the fuck they were talking about on this specific injury. Like people have said, oh, I've seen this before. Okay, yeah, but is it like this? Every injury was different, and I found shopping around was crucial, and not just relying on the club will just present you with your GPs and your physios. Well, I'm going to herbalists, I'm going to reflexologists, I'm going to remedial massagers, I'm going to chiros. Actually, an interesting story about that. If you understand a little bit about in the 20s and 30s, right, in the US and around the world, Howard Florey and Alexander Fleming were in the throes of developing probably one of the number one inventions of the millennium, which was penicillin. And that's when I'm talking about infectious diseases, that was the turning point. Well, around that time, the Rockefellers, who had basically monopolised the oil around the world, they were in breach of antitrust, and I think in 1903 or 4 they had to divide their company up into seven companies because they were just monopolising everything, and they turned into Ampol and BP and the same mobs that are still going now. But that was sort of J.D. Rockefeller. The next Rockefeller Jr., He then comes along and he's thinking, where do I make my mark? And then he starts to, and now these guys are already putting big money into Harvard schools and various places, and through philanthropic sort of ideas, but it gives them influence in these universities, be it at Cambridge or Harvard or Princeton and these sorts of schools, and they get the best and the brightest, and they put them through. And Howard Florey was actually, he won a Rockefeller Prize just before he developed the precursor to what was penicillin. So they all get involved, and Rockefeller then decides, right, the next big thing is pharmaceuticals. So they then look around, they start to change legislation so that changes what people can do at various schools or whatnot. They start to ban, this is around the time they started banning hemp, whereas it was the number one thing in the world in terms of strength of fibre and all the rest of it, clothes,
Cars made out of
everything. Yet they knew the benefits of hemp back then, and that ran contrary to the synthetic approach of the new pharmaceutical companies. So Rockefeller basically bought huge positions in all the big pharmaceutical places. Of course, the Germans in Bayer and these sorts of guys were also very strong in that. He basically controlled it through the US and then made it illegal for herbalists and naturopaths. They couldn't, this is the reason, 100 years later, you go to a chiro and you put your card down, health card. Oh, no, we don't cover chiro. Oh, why not? Oh, because that's sort of fringe, because that was made illegal 100 years ago because it started to impact on the role that the new pharmaceuticals could play. And then coming in, and then obviously it was great during World War II and saved heaps of lives, and it was just a huge industry beyond that. And since that time, all of these anthroposophic medicine and all of these alternative approaches, even Chinese medicine, been around 3,000 or 4,000 years, and you won't find anybody talking about it. But it looks after half a billion Chinese every year, and it's only now that we're starting to see, say, with the hemp oil. I know with Mum and Dad, and they were on that for a while, rather than the painkillers. And now a lot of people are on a lot of drugs which are just completely toxic to them. But the drug companies are up front. They if you're prepared to read their little inserts, and say, well, you'll get this, you'll get that, you'll get the runs, you'll have dry skin, and then the potential very very minor group there could be X and Y.
With hemp oil, you're referring to CBD oil because they do sell hemp oil which doesn't have the cannabinoids in it. They've all been taken out, and it's not. It doesn't have the same properties as CBD oil. So you can buy that at your pharmacy. You can buy that, and it's not. I don't really know what the benefits are. CBD oil is the one that helps with inflammation, pain management, all that type of stuff. So there is a difference there. Just picking up on that in case someone was like, oh, maybe I should try hemp oil. CBD is what you want. So
back to my point about, like, I've got inflammation. Okay, take some ibuprofen. Yeah, get it right.
Sure.
But or take a painkiller.
Yeah.
Right, a stock standard painkiller, codeine. Yeah.
Codeine. Yeah.
Now all that does is just block the senses. It just blocks the pain, so it doesn't get to the core of the issue. Right. So as soon as that wanes in terms of its effectiveness, and over time you then have to take more and more in order to get the same protective effort. They won't work over time. So in order to get to the inflamed lower back, if it's a lower back, we need to get to the basis there. So maybe a little bit of a flush with a massage, mixed with maybe a little bit of breathing to try and sort of reduce that inflammation, change the chemical balance of your body, and a little bit of CBD oil. Now, a lot of older men have, dementia is just sort of taking off, sadly, and sort of cognitive issues. Taking pain-killing tablets is just accelerating their condition. Now, I don't know whether that's all part of the business model. We'll just give them the drugs, sit them in the bed, and that way we don't have to do anything with them all day.
They just make us money.
That means we don't have to have as many nurses because we've drugged this person out and all the rest of it.
And doctors will just give it. I know we have someone in our family at the moment that's just copping pain meds. Like, it's crazy how easy they can get them. Like, just popping pills. Like, it's mad. I mean, I know personally I had this issue with my lower back, and I tried everything to fix it, physio, chiro, everything. And what ended up happening is my physio said, why don't you try strengthening your hip flexors? Worked like that. Sweet. Just found something, right? But we have a whole generation of people, particularly older people, who are those ones who are going to fall into that that cognitive decline, who will just listen to the doctor and just take the med that they give them. And they also talk about dementia, Alzheimer's being the third type of diabetes, diabetes type 3. And you look at their diets and it's all refined carbs, it's all sugar, it's all this type of shit. And that's what's really eating away at the brain slowly over time.
Well, I went to the care centre and I asked them about the food. I asked Mum about the food, and she said, "Oh, it's basically carbohydrate based.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of sort of quality protein, but it's lots of potato and lots of carbs and cereals and all these sorts of things. And I think a lot of this has been already decided. I know one of the things I looked into was a study. It was called the Women's Health Study. I don't know if we talked about this before. It was South Africa. It was $700 million. Women's Health Study, 50,000 people in the study. It was women. And one cohort were told to stay on the high carbohydrate, low fat diet, the healthy diet, so-called healthy diet. And the other one was just to go off and do what you want and eat as much fats and all the rest of it. Well, it turned out, that there was a significant increase in the group in follow-up heart attacks and heart problems from the group who were eating the healthier diet. And the conclusion they came to, and
the standard healthy diet,
that we learn at school and I've been learning in sport, carbohydrates and just little bits of fat.
Little food pyramid.
Yes.
The food pyramid. And what they were finding was that those carbohydrates, because they get absorbed so very quickly into your body, they go straight into your bloodstream. Every time they go into your bloodstream and you've got that sugar in your bloodstream, and we think we need to carbo load in order to have that energy and whatnot, which actually leaves the bloodstream within 10 minutes of energy expenditure, we end up having an issue with, or people who eat high carbohydrates end up getting over 20, 30 years insulin resistant. And before I had my heart attack, I was insulin resistant, the last set of bloods I got. And I've since done bloods and I've completely reversed that because I've gotten rid of certainly all processed carbohydrates. If I cook an egg, I will probably get a piece of toast. Otherwise, what are you going to clean it up with?
Avocado.
Yeah.
Avocado. That's what I use because I'm back on keto now. So it's all avocado and it mops up the egg.
Yeah.
So now you know.
But I was just on top of that. I was trying to then sort of work out when did heart attacks start? Are they a thing that's been going forever and maybe misdiagnosed perhaps or whatever? And there was American president. I hope the listeners forgive me for forgetting who was the president in 1921.
Oh God,
US president.
Here we go.
Look it up. He died.
Pull that up, Gabe.
Pull it up, Gabo.
He died of a stroke. They thought it was a stroke.
Warren Harding? Is that one?
He died of a stroke. Cerebral embolism was the official cause of death, and this is a prime minister in office, so it's a pretty big president in office. And he, it wasn't until months later that they reviewed it and they said, "No, we think this was a heart attack." Mm. And the reason that was the case was because heart attacks were actually quite new. Coming out of World War I, a lot of the stress and all the rest of it, they started to see different examples of this, the heart just going. And this was around the time, the Roaring 20s, and people were starting to, there was much more sort of store-bought food and things like this. And so I thought, okay, that was a datum point for me. Maybe heart attacks started sort of to be a real thing around that time. So I then thought, my simple logic, what did they eat before there were heart attacks, before the diet of that period and the diet that we're currently in? And what I found was that most people ate eggs and butter and lard and saturated meat fats and all the rest of it. Hardly ate any of this. No one's sitting down to Weet-Bix, in the morning.
And also didn't need to eat as much.
No, I eat once a day.
Exactly. When you're on a high-fat diet, you're very satiated throughout the day. Like I ate something very small, like a little meat patty left over from dinner last night today, and that's it. I've been to the gym. I've been filming all day.
How come we always got to end the podcast like bang on 6 then?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm actually getting really hungry. I'm keen for dinner.
We always tone literally, this is like a world record. Like,
no.
No, I'm not saying it for
if
that.
you're telling my dad to shut up, mate,
I'm not saying it for that. I'm saying this is...
No, let's finish it.
Let's finish off. Bluey's got to go home to food.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been real.
That's not it at all. No, I'm saying like normally he's bragging about how satiated he is.
Bluey got his...
How satiated I am. I'm never hungry. Mate, 5 to 6, doesn't matter who's on, doesn't matter how good the episode's going. He starts looking at his watch and cuts it at 6 o'clock every... This is unbelievable.
Because I haven't eaten all day.
Let's finish it.
I didn't want to finish it. I'm just saying...
You've got your lookalikes and now you want to finish...
Don't fucking put it on me now.
Ladies
You're
and
hungry.
Gentlemen, Bluey Nelson,
Don't fucking
Gabo.
put... That's fucking dog shit.
Jones, thank you for your time. We'll get you back. We'll get
Great to
James
be here.
back on and we'll have another 4-hour episode. And we'll,
You understand what's happening? Gabe, you see this shit?
why did you do
Yeah, I know
this?
what's going
I
was
didn't fucking do
enjoying-
anything.
You gave him the out.
I was
mate.
enjoying listening to my old man who,
This is fucking
Come on,
dog
let's
shit.
finish.
we've been wanting him on the
This
show
is
for months.
fucking dog
It's
shit.
our first walkout
It's a first one.
because you've offended him. Ladies and
This
gentlemen,
is fucking bullshit.
go and check out Jones. He's not on any social media, but...
Although I'm just about to start a podcast.
Well, how about the first thing you learned is to talk into the fucking microphone, big fella?
Just about to start a podcast.
What's
All
it
right.
called?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. That's a good name. We'll get him back on and all right.
This is
He's,
fucking bullshit. He's out.
he's fallen into the door. We gotta go. We gotta go make sure he's all right.
This
He's,
is fucking outrageous. I
He's
can't
been
believe
Wim
you're
Hofing
doing
too
this.
much and he's off his head. All right, we'll see you later. Toodaloo. Bye.
Oh, bless.